I caught my SIL trying to convince me to leave my sick husband. When I confronted her, she dropped a bombshell that left us all shocked. My husband, Henry, 36M, and I, 34F, have been married for 8 years. We met in college when I was a sophomore, and he was a senior working as a TA in my literature class. I remember being instantly drawn to his warm smile and the way his eyes lit up when he talked about poetry. We bonded over our shared love of obscure poets and spent hours discussing metaphors and symbolism. Henry has always had some health issues. Even back in college, he'd sometimes miss classes due to severe migraines or unexplained fatigue, but he never let it define him. He was always the first to organize study groups or volunteer for campus events. That's one of the things I fell in love with, his resilience and positive attitude in the face of adversity. When Henry's parents died in a car accident during his senior year, it was a devastating blow. Henry was suddenly responsible for his younger sister, Julie, 32F, who was still in high school. Without hesitation, Henry put his own plans on hold. He turned down a prestigious graduate school offer and instead took a job at a local publishing house to support Julie. I was in awe of Henry's selflessness. We had only been dating for a few months at that point, but I knew then that he was someone special. Over the next few years, I watched as Henry worked tirelessly to ensure Julie had everything she needed. He attended her parent-teacher conferences, helped her with college applications, and even learned to French braid her hair for prom. Despite the challenges, Henry and I grew closer. We'd spend quiet evenings in his small apartment, reading poetry to each other while Julie studied in her room. Henry would often fall asleep early, exhausted from work and caregiving, but I didn't mind. I was falling more in love with him every day. After Julie went off to college, Henry and I got married in a small ceremony. We didn't have much money for a big wedding, but it was perfect for us. We wrote our own vows, incorporating lines from our favorite poems. Julie was Henry's best woman and gave a touching speech about how Henry had been both a brother and a father to her. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. Henry's health issues were always there in the background, but we managed them together. I started my own small business, a boutique bookstore specializing in poetry, which allowed me to work from home and be there for Henry when he needed me. About 6 months ago, everything changed. Henry started experiencing severe joint pain and extreme fatigue. After numerous doctor visits and tests, he was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disorder. It's not life-threatening, but it requires significant lifestyle changes and daily medication. Henry's been working from home more often now, which has actually been nice in some ways. We get to spend more time together, and I can make sure he's taking care of himself. But I know it's been hard for him to adjust. Henry's always been so active and independent, and now there are days when he can barely get out of bed. The real problem started when Julie moved to our city for a new job. She lives about 20 minutes away and has been coming over for dinner at least twice a week. At first, it was great having her around. Henry was thrilled to have his sister nearby, and I enjoyed having another woman to talk to. But lately, Julie's been making some really weird comments when Henry isn't around. It started small. She'd say things like, "I bet you wish you married someone healthier," or, "It must be so hard taking care of a sick husband." I'd always laugh it off or change the subject, thinking she was just trying to show concern in an awkward way. Then it got worse. Last week, when Henry was in the other room on a work call, Julie said to me, "You know, if something happens to Henry, I'd be happy to set you up with one of my friends. You're too young to be tied down to someone sick." I was shocked. I told her that was inappropriate and that I love Henry, health issues and all. She just laughed and said, "Come on, you can't tell me you don't think about it sometimes." The thing is, Henry has no idea this is happening. He thinks Julie is being supportive and helpful, and I know how much he loves his sister. They've always been close, especially since their parents died. Henry sacrificed so much for Julie, and I don't want to be the one to come between them. But Julie's comments are really starting to get to me. It feels like she's trying to plant doubts in my mind about my marriage. And it's especially hurtful because she knows how scared we both were when Henry first got his diagnosis. I remember the night we got the call from the doctor. Henry and I were sitting on our porch, drinking tea and reading poetry like we often do in the evenings. When Henry's phone rang and he saw it was the doctor, his hand started shaking so badly he could barely answer it. I held his other hand as we listened to the diagnosis together. We spent the rest of the night researching the condition and crying, but also reassuring each other that we'd get through this together. Julie was actually really supportive during that time. She came over almost every day, bringing groceries and helping with housework when Henry was too tired. That's why her recent behavior is so confusing and hurtful. I'm not sure what to do. Should I tell Henry about what Julie's been saying? I'm worried it would devastate him. Should I confront Julie directly? Or am I overreacting and should just ignore it? Part of me wonders if Julie is acting this way because she's scared of losing Henry. I know she still has a lot of unresolved grief from losing their parents, and maybe Henry's diagnosis has brought all that back up. But that doesn't excuse her behavior. I love my husband, and I'm committed to our marriage, health issues, and all. Henry has been my rock through so many challenges. When my dad had a heart attack a few years ago, Henry was the one who drove me to the hospital every day and made sure I was eating and sleeping. When my first attempt at opening a bookstore failed, Henry was there with encouragement and practical help to get me back on my feet. Now it's my turn to be there for him, and I want to do it without any doubts or negativity. But I'm worried that if Julie's comments continue, it's going to cause serious problems in our family. How do I handle this situation without damaging the sibling relationship that means so much to my husband? Update 1. Thank you all for your advice and support. A lot has happened since my last post, and I wanted to give you an update. After reading your comments, I decided to talk to Julie directly before bringing it up with Henry. I invited her over for coffee when I knew Henry would be out at a doctor's appointment. I spent the morning nervously cleaning the house and baking cookies, a stress habit I picked up from my mom. When Julie arrived, I got straight to the point. I told her that her comments about Henry's health and our marriage were inappropriate and hurtful. I explained how much Henry and I love each other, and that his health issues have only made our bond stronger. Julie's reaction was not what I expected. Instead of apologizing or trying to explain herself, she got defensive. She said, "I'm just looking out for you. You're wasting your life taking care of Henry. He's always been weak and now he's just dragging you down with him." I was stunned. I asked her how she could say such things about her own brother, especially after everything he'd done for her. That's when Julie revealed something I never knew. Apparently, when their parents died, there was a significant life insurance payout. Henry used most of it to pay for Julie's college and living expenses, leaving very little for himself. Julie said she always felt guilty about this, and seeing Henry sick now makes her feel even worse. As Julie talked, I remembered something Henry had once told me about their childhood. When Julie was born, she had some health complications and spent the first few months of her life in the hospital. Henry, who was only 4 at the time, would sit by her incubator for hours, singing nursery rhymes and telling her stories. Their parents always said that Henry's voice was what helped Julie get stronger. Listening to Julie now, I realize that she's carrying a lot of guilt and unresolved emotions. She admitted that she's been trying to drive a wedge between us because she thinks if we split up, Henry would be forced to focus on himself for once. I was angry, but I also felt a pang of sympathy. I told Julie about the night Henry got his diagnosis, how scared we both were, and how we promised to face it together. I reminded her of all the times Henry had been there for both of us, how he'd dropped everything to help me when my dad was sick, how he'd supported Julie through her breakup last year. Julie broke down in tears. Between sobs, she told me that she's terrified of losing Henry. She said, "He's the only real family I have left. I can't watch him get sicker. I can't lose him too." We ended up talking for hours. Julie shared stories from their childhood that Henry had never told me, like how he'd work extra shifts at his part-time job in high school to buy Julie the prom dress she wanted, or how he'd proofread all her college essays even when he was exhausted from his own studies. By the end of our conversation, I felt drained but also relieved. Julie apologized for her behavior and promised to do better. We agreed that she should talk to Henry about her feelings, but in a more constructive way. After Julie left, I sat on the porch swing where Henry and I often read together, trying to process everything. That's where Henry found me when he got home from his appointment. One look at my face, and he knew something was wrong. I took a deep breath and told him everything. Julie's comments, our confrontation, what she revealed about the insurance money, and her fears about losing him. Henry was quiet for a long time after I finished talking. Then he started to cry. He told me he never wanted me to know about the insurance money because he didn't want me to feel indebted to him in any way. He also said he had no idea Julie felt this way, and that he was heartbroken by her actions. We spent the rest of the night talking about everything: our marriage, his health, his relationship with Julie, and our future. Henry reassured me that he's happy and fulfilled in our marriage, and that he never for a moment thought I was wasting my life with him. As we talked, I was reminded of why I fell in love with Henry in the first place: his kindness, his strength, his ability to see the best in people even when they're at their worst. We recited some of our favorite poems to each other, finding comfort in the familiar words. As for Julie, Henry decided he needs some time to process everything. He sent her a text asking for space and saying he'll reach out when he's ready to talk. He also said he wants to encourage Julie to seek therapy to deal with her unresolved grief and guilt. I'm still processing everything that happened, but I feel relieved that everything is out in the open now. Henry and I are closer than ever, and we're committed to facing whatever comes next together. We know it won't be easy, but as one of our favorite poets, Rumi, said, "The wound is the place where the light enters you." Maybe this difficult situation will lead to healing for all of us. Update 2. It's been a couple of weeks since my last update, and things have been intense, to say the least. Henry took some time to process everything before reaching out to Julie. During this time, he threw himself into his work and his poetry. I'd often find him in the early hours of the morning, hunched over his desk, scribbling verses about family, loss, and healing. It was his way of working through his emotions. He finally called Julie last week and asked her to meet us at our house to talk things through. I was nervous about the meeting, but Henry felt it was important for all of us to clear the air. The night before Julie was due to come over, Henry and I stayed up late, talking about our hopes and fears for the conversation ahead. We fell asleep on the couch, hands intertwined, drawing strength from each other. When Julie arrived, the tension was palpable. We all sat in the living room, surrounded by bookshelves filled with the poetry collections Henry and I have amassed over the years. Henry started by expressing how hurt he was by Julie's actions. He explained that while he appreciated her concern, trying to interfere in our marriage was completely unacceptable. Julie broke down in tears. She apologized profusely, saying she never meant to hurt us. She explained that seeing Henry sick brought back all her fears from when their parents died. She admitted that she's been in therapy, something none of us knew, to deal with her unresolved grief and guilt. What happened next surprised both Henry and me. Julie revealed that she's been struggling with her own health issues. She was recently diagnosed with the same autoimmune disorder as Henry. She'd been keeping it a secret, partly out of fear and partly out of guilt. Her inappropriate comments and attempts to separate us were, in a twisted way, her attempt to push us away before her own health deteriorated. Henry was stunned. I watched as a range of emotions flickered across his face. Shock, concern, and finally, a deep sadness. He immediately went into Big Brother mode, asking Julie about her treatment plan and offering support. I could see the relief on Julie's face as she realized that Henry's love for her hadn't diminished. We spent hours talking, crying, and eventually laughing as we shared stories and cleared up misunderstandings. Julie apologized to me specifically for her hurtful comments, acknowledging that she had projected her own fears onto our marriage. She shared a memory from their childhood, how Henry had taught her to ride a bike, running alongside her for hours until she finally got the hang of it. "You've always been there to catch me when I fall," she told Henry. "I was scared that this time you wouldn't be able to." Henry reassured Julie that no matter what happens with their health, they'll always be there for each other. He reminded her of the promise they made to their parents at the funeral, that they'd always take care of each other. "That promise doesn't end just because we're sick," Henry said. "If anything, it means we need each other more than ever." By the end of the night, it felt like a huge weight had been lifted. We agreed that Julie would continue her therapy, and Henry suggested that they both join a support group for people with their condition. I offered to help Julie research treatment options and to be there for her as a sister-in-law and friend. As Julie was leaving, she paused at the door and turned to us. "You know," she said, "Mom and Dad would be so proud of the family we've become. All of us." It was the first time I'd ever heard her mention their parents without bursting into tears. After Julie left, Henry and I sat on our porch swing, processing everything that had happened. The night was cool and clear, and the sky was full of stars. Henry pointed out the constellation Gemini, the twins. "That's us," he said, referring to him and Julie. "Different but connected, always watching out for each other." It's not going to be easy, and there's still a lot of healing to be done, but I feel cautiously optimistic about the future. Henry and Julie are rebuilding their relationship on a foundation of honesty and shared experience. And Henry and I are stronger than ever, united in our love for each other and our commitment to supporting our family through whatever health challenges we may face. As we sat there under the stars, Henry recited a few lines from one of our favorite poems. "The darkness around us might somewhat light up if we would first practice to shine out." It felt like a perfect description of where we are now, facing our challenges head on and finding light in each other. Update 3. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some positive developments in our family situation. Henry and Julie have been attending a support group together for people with their autoimmune disorder. It meets every Wednesday evening at a community center downtown. The first time they went, Henry was nervous. He's always been private about his health issues, and the idea of sharing with strangers made him uncomfortable. But Julie encouraged him, reminding him of how he'd always pushed her to step out of her comfort zone. I remember waiting up for Henry that first night, worried about how it would go. When he came home, his eyes were red from crying, but he was smiling. "It's like they speak our language," he told me. "They understand without us having to explain everything." Since then, Henry and Julie haven't missed a single meeting. They're learning new coping strategies and connecting with others who understand their experiences. Henry says it's brought them closer than they've been in years. They've started carpooling to the meetings and often grab dinner together afterward. It's heartwarming to see them rebuilding their relationship. Julie has continued her therapy and has made significant progress in dealing with her guilt and grief. She's been much more open with us about her feelings and struggles. Last week, she even invited us over to her place for dinner. The first time she's done that since moving here. When we arrived at Julie's apartment, I was struck by how much it reminded me of Henry's old place from college. The walls were covered in framed poems and literary quotes, just like Henry used to have. It was a small gesture, but it showed how much Julie still looked up to her brother. During dinner, Julie surprised us with some news. She's decided to start a nonprofit organization focused on supporting young adults who become caregivers for their siblings after losing their parents. She said that going through this experience made her realize how little support there is for people in situations like hers and Henry's. Henry was touched by Julie's idea and immediately offered to help. He's going to use his business contacts to help Julie set up the organization and find potential donors. Seeing them work together on something positive has been really heartwarming. As for Henry and me, we're doing better than ever. This whole experience has made us appreciate each other even more. We've started having weekly health check-ins where we talk openly about how we're feeling, both physically and emotionally. It's brought us even closer. I've also been making an effort to take better care of myself. I realize that I can't be there for Henry if I'm not taking care of my own health. I've joined a yoga class and started seeing a nutritionist to make sure I'm staying healthy too. There are still challenges, of course. Henry's condition isn't going away, and now we're also concerned about Julie's health. But facing these challenges together as a family has made us all stronger. Last night, as Henry and I were reading poetry on our porch swing, he turned to me and said, "You know, I think we're going to be okay." And for the first time in a long while, I truly believe we will be.